Yeah, we talked about it last week. This will be our college football preview show. The real games are still 2 weeks away for local teams, but they'll have that first week next week where they play about 4 games throughout the day. You can get a little taste to get your beak wet. The first AP poll is out skinny. Georgia is number 1. Ohio State comes in at number 2. Oregon number 3, Texas number 4, and Alabama will round out the top 5. Other teams of interest here, Notre Dame, a lot of Notre Dame fans around this area. They come in at number 7. Michigan, the defending national champions, in at number 9. And then Kentucky was in the others receiving votes category. They
Not
came in at
many.
number 40th, if you counted out that far. So, Skinny, let's start with Cincinnati out of our local teams to preview here. They finished 3-9 last year. It was, by all accounts, a disappointing first season for Scott Satterfield, disappointing first season in the Big 12. So let's start with this. What does success look like for Cincinnati coming off a 3-9 season that saw them go 1-8 in Big 12 play?
Yeah, I think based on the schedule, I mean, they don't face a lot of the Big 12 heavyweights this year. I think based on that, I think it should be a bowl game. I don't think 7-5 in a bowl game. I think that should be the minimum, to be quite honest with you. I don't think this is a 10-win team by any stretch, but I think at least 7 wins in a bowl game. I mean, you have a real legit shot to start 4-0. Towson's a gimme. I don't think Miami's going to sneak up on you this year like they did last year, and you get pitted home. And then your first Big 12 game is against arguably the worst team in the Big 12, at least on paper, going into the year, and that's Houston. It's a great chance to start 4-0 and get a huge confidence boost. Then you're only asking for 3 more wins the rest of the way, Rick. And frankly, again, they got a break this year with the Big 12 schedule. I'm not knocking them for it. It is what it is. But take advantage of the break that you got with the Big 12 schedule.
Scott Satterfield, because of what his status was at Louisville when Cincinnati hired him, it's like he almost never had a chance when he came to Cincinnati. And people were negative almost immediately because it was rumored that Louisville was looking to get rid of him and was going to do so if they could figure out how to get out from under his contract. They didn't want to pay him to go away. He hadn't been that bad. That was going to be a tough sell. But when Cincinnati was willing to come hire him away, even pay to get him away from Louisville, it was like the perfect out for Cardinals fans. And I think that soured a lot of Cincinnati fans on him coming over. Whether that was right or wrong, that's basically what happened. And when you have your first year, and look, it's a first year for a new coach, first year in a brand new conference where you're taking a major step up.
A god awful quarterback.
Well, there's that too. But I mean, Luke Fickell had left. The cupboard was bare now. I mean, there were a lot of things going on to where it's probably not fair to look at Scott Satterfield's first year at Cincinnati, first year in the Big 12, and say he's a terrible coach or he's doing a terrible job there. Yet it does feel like coming into his second season, there's a lot of pressure here. How do you see that Scott Satterfield situation going into year 2? Is this like a make or break year for him, or where are we at with that?
Oh, I mean, I think if it's a sub 500 year, that you probably give him one more, and it would have to be off the charts good in year 3. That's where, again, I mean, I think he's set up to take a step forward and the program take a step forward because, again, this is a better team on paper. You do have a better quarterback on paper, by far, to be quite honest with you. And again, the schedule sets up nicely for you. You know, the Miami loss last year felt like a kick in the teeth because you just shouldn't lose to Miami. That just should not happen. And then it just kind of snowballed in the Big 12. And that is what happens is, when you're in these major conferences that have, mega good programs, it can snowball on you once things start rolling downhill from an injury perspective, from just, you look up looking for a soft landing spot. You go, crap, we got to play them at their place now. Okay, buckle up. Let's go. It's just really hard. And I think that's where this year, I think it will be disappointing if it's anything other than at least 7 wins in a bowl game.
Well, they got off to that, they got their wins early last year. And then even some of the early losses last year where there's one possession games that they felt like they were in, and we're wondering, like, are they going to be competitive in the Big 12? And then down the stretch, it just really got away from them. It kept getting worse. It seemed to snowball. And I don't know if it was a losing the locker room situation or if guys lost confidence or once they started trying to make some changes at quarterback, if that really screwed up the offense even more than it already was or what. But it was concerning the way last year ended. So I'm not exactly sure what the record needs to be this year, but I do think you have to avoid another downward spiral year where you
Oh
see the
yeah.
team sort of tank and it looks like they're not playing for anything at the end of the year again.
And again, that's the what I mean. Scott Satterfield started off with no cachet whatsoever. I mean, you can go back to his days at Appy State and say, well, he did a great job there, but nobody cares about that. You care what he did at Louisville right down the road. And the end at Louisville wasn't very good. And to everybody's point, to your point, and everybody else has made this point, I mean, Louisville's looking to get rid of him. I mean, UC gave them a break, for goodness sakes. And so then you're like, okay, we're taking Louisville's cast off coach. All right, let's see what he can do. And he didn't do anything. And that's where I go to this year. They hit the portal hard. They got a good offensive line. This was a team that even last year, despite Emory Jones's issues throwing the ball, was one of the top rushing attacks in the country. There's no reason to think it can't be that this year with better quarterback play. And so that's where I'm not just bullish on this team winning at least 7 games and going to a bowl. Like I said, I think it would be disappointing if they don't do at least that.
It's a little surprising when you go back to last year, you think about how bad that team was, but then when you see some of the numbers, you're like, wait, that doesn't add up. Why were they such a good rushing team? Now, granted, part of it is you're terrible at passing the ball and you're just getting through games at some point. Other teams are playing second and third stringers late in the game, and maybe you're gaining late yardage in some of those games when it's already out of hand. But to your point about the offensive line, which they've returned the entire offensive line, there are some things to work with. They did put up some numbers last year. At the same time, that would also concern me about the coaching again. It's like, well, you put up these numbers and yet you didn't put up any points hardly. What does that say about some of the play calling and decision making down in the red zone? To wrap up the Satterfield conversation, though, just to clarify, if they fired him after this season, which neither one of us think is likely to happen, I can't see that happening at all, they would owe him $15 million still. They'd owe him 100% of what's left on his contract. If they were to fire him after next season, so give him 3 full years, fire him after December 31st of 2025, it goes down to just $8 million. So that's chopped nearly in half. It's 70% of what's still owed on his contract at that point.
And that's still a chunk of a buyout. I mean, you're getting Big 12 money now, but obviously everything else is costing more as well. I mean, I think at that point, if it's 3 years in, it's still a pretty significant buyout. But if things are not going well 3 years in, I can't imagine you let a guy try to take a swing at year 4. I just can't imagine. I mean, maybe you do because of the financial ramifications, but I can't believe that. And again, I just don't think this year. I just don't think this year goes sideways. I just don't. I mean, again, the schedule's just set up for them to do. Again, I'm not looking 9-10 wins and be a college football playoff team or fight for the Big 12 championship, but I do think 7 wins should clearly be in the realm of possibility.
We're going to get to the over-under here in a second. I just got a couple more questions about this year's team. Are you more or less confident in Indiana transfer quarterback Brendan Sorsby than you were Emory Jones? I think I know the answer to that one.
Way more. And listen, I don't think he's as good as I'm hearing people think he is, but I do think he's a clear upgrade. I mean, the guy is actually clearly a better pure passer than Emory Jones. And while Emory did help you in the run game, Sorsby can run it a little bit. And again, you got that offensive line and running back situation where maybe you don't have to do as much quarterback run game.
Yeah, I've listened to a couple previews where they're talking about Cincinnati's offense this year. Well, they'll transition from a running quarterback to a pure pocket passer. I'm like, that's not Sorsby's game, really. He is an athletic runner, too. I think they're going to use him in a dual threat. Look, I don't think Scott Satterfield would want a guy who's not a mobile quarterback. He's always had mobile quarterbacks and always used them in that way. Sorsby is a guy that will run a little bit, too. I don't think he's going to be a quote-unquote pure pocket passer, like I've heard some say. Now, it's not the same as Emory Jones, but again, he will run the ball some. On the defensive side, Skinny, I'm looking at previews and other things, just getting some of the nuggets that we get from some of the local guys covering the teams. I'm hearing as many as 6 or 7 transfers could be starting on this defensive unit with a new defensive coordinator, Tyson Veit, the former Iowa State linebackers coach who came over this offseason. The defense was terrible last year. So is that a good or a bad thing that they could have as many as like 6 or 7 new starters from transfer portal?
No, I think it's I don't know if it's either good or bad. It was necessary. I mean, you needed an infusion of talent, and the portal can sometimes bring that. And I think maybe it's a good thing that it's a bunch of new guys with a new coordinator, because it's not like a bunch of holdovers that are now hearing a different voice with a different system. It's all these guys coming in together, learning the system together. And I think a lot of it starts with, how healthy is Dante Corleone? I mean, is he going to be able to give you a ton of snaps, some snaps? Is he 100%? Is this going to creep up again? Because he is at least one of the few difference makers on paper heading into this year on defense. And I think the big question mark is because of all those transfers, what are they on the back end of that defense? Are they legit? Are these guys legit? or is this trouble in the making because they can't play? Nobody knows until we see it.
Well, last year they could not stop the run at all,
At all.
especially late in the year. And the issues I'm hearing about on the defensive front right now are concerning for a unit that still in flux to begin with. I mean, we don't really know who's supposed to be starting or who should be starting or who the best guys are going into the year. Seems like those positions are kind of up for grabs. And then the one spot where you feel like you might have some returning cachet with Dante Corleone, he might not even be available to play. Now they're having some other injury issues there up front on that defensive line. I think the offense is going to take a step forward. I'm really concerned about the defense. And let's face it, I mean, defensive coordinators on either side of the ball, a lot of times their first year in a high major conference, it can be a little bit tough. I mean, so I'm not exactly expecting their new defensive coordinator, Tyson Veit, to hit the ground running here.
Yeah, no, I mean, but the Big 12 is all about winning games 41-34. It's kind of what it is.
That's true. Skinny, let's go to the over-under for Cincinnati. It is 5 wins on DraftKings, 5 flat, no half on there. What are your thoughts? You've mentioned a few times you're seeing 7 wins.
I'm bullish on over 5. Yeah,
if you're watching on YouTube, we've got the schedule up here on the screen.
I mean, again, Towson, Pitt, Miami, Houston. You should start 4-0. Should. I'm not saying could, might, if things fall right. No, you should start 4-0. Texas Tech, it's a road game, but meh. UCF will be tough. Arizona State's horrifyingly bad. There's your 5th win right there. And then Colorado, by the time they play them, Warren Sapp's talking about his defensive line is choosing between a 38 or a 9mm. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. He's just a goof. I mean, that's an implosion waiting to happen by the time UC goes to Boulder on October 26th. Then West Virginia's a home game. Probably would lean towards UC in that one and even lean towards UC in the TCU game. So I get to Arizona State in 5. I've still got 3 more chances, in my opinion, to go over that total. And I'm not so sure at Iowa State isn't winnable.
You're a bit more optimistic than I am about this team. I see 4 wins realistically for me. I see Towson as a win. I think they owe Miami, so they're going to go up there and win that one this year. I do not have Pitt as a win. I think that's going to be a tough game. I have them beating Houston. I think Houston's going to be terrible. And then Arizona State was another game that I had them winning. Yeah. I think Arizona State and West Virginia, both of those games, you'd like to feel like they have a chance playing those games at home, kind of big 12 games. You'd like to say that they can win those. And even TCU, that last game at the end of the year, I'm just not as confident as you are. And then when you talk about these road games at Texas Tech, at UCF, at Colorado, at Iowa State,
Colorado's
and
a joke.
At Kansas State, I'll be honest with you, Skinny, I don't see them winning hardly any of those.
Yeah, Colorado's a joke. And I got a feeling by the time they play them, they're going to be a mess.
Could be. And that would be great for Cincinnati if they could get an easy one. Look, if they could go Arizona State and at Colorado back-to-back going into that bye week, you'd feel really good about them returning home to play West Virginia on that November 9th game.
Yeah, I mean, a legit shot to be 6-2 at that point.
Yeah, I mean, that would make the season a whole lot more fun. So it really feels like that the 3 weeks in between the byes are going to be huge for this team. I mean, you got to take care of business before then. Towson, Pitt, at Miami, home against Houston, and then at Texas Tech. I mean, you're saying 4-1 there, right? You think
maybe even 5-0.
I think 3-2 is more realistic for them. But if they're 3-2 there and they can somehow swing 2-1 in that 3-game stretch we just talked about at UCF, home against Arizona State, and then at Colorado, at that point you're really playing for something in those final weeks of the season, and the last. That final stretch that's going to be difficult will be a lot more fun for UC fans.
Yeah, give me 1 second, Rick. I'm going to call up the preseason poll in the Big 12. And again, it's just a poll. It doesn't mean, it's just it's opinion related. Hang on, it's going to take me a minute to do this. I've got it somewhere. Come on. There we go. Whoops.
It's Utah.
Okay, so let's go slowly through those for a second. I got it now. Yeah. So they don't play Utah. They do play Kansas State. Third on the list is Oklahoma State. Don't play them. Don't play Kansas. Don't play Arizona. Next toughest team they play is Iowa State at 6. West Virginia 7. UCF 8. Texas Tech 9. TCU 10. Colorado 11. Houston 15. Arizona State 16. I mean, you're kind of given a gift this year. You're not playing the upper crust of the league, at least by voter standards. You're missing out on 4 of the top 5 teams as voted on in the preseason poll.
I totally agree with that. The schedule is set up well for them. The concern I have is I don't know that they're set up to take advantage of
Okay.
a softer schedule.
Fair
The
enough.
issue with that is, Kenny, you still have to be better than the teams
Well,
you're playing. Just
then let me
because
just
they're
say
not
that
the best teams in the conference doesn't mean you're better than them.
Well, then if not, then if things are maybe disastrous, the money doesn't probably work out for Scott Satterfield. But I don't think there's any salvaging him at Cincinnati. I just don't. If you
I
can't,
agree.
if you didn't do well enough in the transfer portal this year, and you did get a legit quarterback, I think we can agree with that. I don't know if he's upper level Big 12, but he's certainly a legit quarterback who started in a Power 5 conference and had some success. You got a legit quarterback. You hit the transfer portal pretty hard. If you can't rectify that with that schedule, then shame on you as the coach and the staff.
Yeah, I mean, it better be at least 4 or 5 wins, even if things go south. Even if it's a bad season, you can't be at like 3-9 or 2-10. Again,
No.
if it's that bad, then it's no doubt he's done. It's just a matter of, do they give him that next year? And I think they'll have to give him one more year from a financial perspective. But it becomes a lame duck season at that point, and that's going to stink for everybody.
Yeah, I was going to say, all the hand wringing in that season, it's just going to be a disaster.
Yeah, that's not fun. You don't want to go through that. But let's move on to Kentucky here. The Wildcats were 7-6 last season. They lost 38-35 to Clemson in the Gator Bowl. Skinny, does the expanded 12-team playoff change the way you feel about Kentucky, Mark Stoops, and what needs to be achieved? Does there need to be a next step for this program now?
Yeah, I do think there has to be that next step. And, unfortunately, the year that's got all the vacated wins from 2021, they probably would have gotten in the college football playoff, the expanded college football playoff that year. They didn't, because it wasn't expanded at that point in time. I don't think this is the year either, although arguably on paper, this might be the best defense that he's had, but you got a question at quarterback. You got a little bit of a question at running back, and now you've got an injury at running back. I think the offensive line will be okay. I think the receivers will be really good. Tight ends will be really good. I mean, you've got some pieces in place, but you've also got, Rick, on the schedule, number 1 Georgia, number 6 Ole Miss, number 4 Texas, a Tennessee team that suddenly is owning you again on the road, mind you. Oh boy, good luck with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be ridiculous. It always is difficult in the SEC. They were picked 11th in the preseason SEC poll. And this is a team that I think people are expecting to be better than last season. I mean, or at least similar to last season. They added a new transfer quarterback in Georgia transfer Brock Vandegrift. He will be taking over for Devin Leary, who was drafted in the 6th round by the Ravens last year. Are you more or less confident in Brock Vandegrift than you were Devin Leary?
I don't know. I know Devin Leary had a track record, and it was a pretty good track record. And he had his moments of good and Brock Vandegrift doesn't. He comes from a better program, Georgia, and you can argue he played behind better quarterbacks there, which he arguably did. But I don't think anybody knows. Even through some of the stuff I've heard from some of the scrimmages has been some really good moments and some really moments. And so I just don't think we know.
It's funny you say that. I pulled up I think it's called 11 Personnel or something like that. It's the KSR football podcast. And they were recapping the scrimmage and said like big scrimmage takeaways or something. It was like a clickbaity headline almost. And I was like, okay, let's see what happened. I'm thinking, oh, let's hear about Brock Vandegrift, or maybe it was exciting takeaways or something like that. I was like, oh, I can't wait to hear about the offense, what they did. They led off the podcast with might have a Ray Guy award winner at punter this year.
It's a hell of a place to start.
I was like, uh-oh, that doesn't sound great.
Yeah, that'd be great, except I don't want him on the field very much, right?
Yeah. The fact that you lead off your scrimmage takeaways with the punter looked really good, I don't, as a Kentucky fan, I would be a little bit concerned about that. Let me just put it that way. I mean, you see even the late drive that Vandegrift had last year against UK, where he led them on a long touchdown drive from out of his own, inside his own 20. He obviously shows some talent, but you're playing with Georgia talent against second and third stringers. It's late in games. I mean, like you said, there's just no real track record here to go off of.
Yeah, and he does get a soft landing spot with the opener with Southern Miss. Maybe that's a confidence boost. But if this team wants to have any kind of semblance of winning season, bowl season, it has to beat South Carolina in week 2. I mean, has to beat South Carolina in week 2 at home.
Yeah, I mean, when you look at the road games for this Kentucky team, they're just insane. Like at Florida, they have a chance to win.
Correct.
But other than that, like at Ole Miss, they're not winning that. At Tennessee, they're probably not winning that. I know it's a rivalry game and they want to say they're going to win it, but they're probably not winning that this year. At Texas, they're not winning this year. I mean, at Florida, maybe because they've had their number recently. But even then, I mean, if you're looking at like the computers going into the season, the computers do not like Kentucky's chances in that game. So the road games this year for Kentucky are a bear. And oh, by the way, the home games include Georgia. You know, like, I mean, it is a bear of a schedule. Skinny, what are you expecting from new offensive coordinator Bush Hamden now that Liam Cohen is gone again?
Yeah, he comes from Boise State, and they've always been a fun offensive team to watch. I'm going to guess it'll be a lot like we've seen here of late with rely on the running game to set up play action stuff and try to hit some home runs. The one thing I wish they don't, I thought they tried to hit too many home runs last year, and maybe there's an intermediate passing game that Brock Vandegrift can master. I'd like to see more of that, and hopefully we do. I mean, when they hit some home runs, they hit them. They just didn't hit them enough.
Yeah, it seems like using the quarterback more as a rushing threat is maybe going to be part of this offense too. I mean, you look at what Boise State did. That's something that happened more there. This guy Bush Hamden has already talked about that a little bit since he's been at UK. And Vandegrift has that type of athleticism. I mean, he's not necessarily a dual threat guy, but he's definitely an athletic quarterback that can run.
Well, and I will tell you this: they're far better situated at backup with Gavin Wimsatt, who again, people can laugh at this. He was a starter at Rutgers and had some success. He's at Rutgers. He's not at Ohio State, and he's not at Michigan. He's not, but he had some success. And the last couple of years when they've had to go to that backup plan, it has been ugly. And so, there's some talk of maybe Gavin Wimsatt landing up in the backfield some and being used as a runner, maybe a package of plays for him to use as well. So I do think they're better situated in that regard. But man, to your point, I mean, I'm even trying to go as optimistic of this is going to be a really good team and Vandegrift's going to be good, but that schedule is not fun.
No, it's not. What do you like about this UK team though? If I I just see a lot of nondescript position groups when I look at their roster. Is there something that stands out to you?
Deion Walker for starters. I mean, if you look, he was selected. I think ESPN did a preseason All-American team. He was selected first team as a defensive tackle. I saw ESPN today did a top 100 college football players list, regardless of position. He came in at like 25, 24. I mean, for a guy who's a defensive tackle that gets double teamed, he had 12.5 tackles for loss and 7.5 sacks. That's a good place. You give me a defensive tackle disruptor, and then you got veterans around him in the linebacking core and on the edges, J.J. Weaver. Max Hairston, a cornerback, was also in the top 100 in ESPN. So you got a top 100 corner, just player overall, not top 100 corner. I'm talking about a guy who's in the top 100 regardless of position at a corner. I think J.J. Weaver's an outstanding edge guy. And you got Deion Walker. That's 3 pretty good levels of defense, and then surround him with what I think are pretty good players as well. I think this defense is going to keep them in even some of those tougher games. It's just so hard against the Georgias and the Texases. The Ole Miss one doesn't scare me because they've played Ole Miss well, and I know Lane Kiffin's done a good job, but that's one I think you could go steal. I don't think they do, but I think you could. But to your point, I mean, I start with 3 automatic losses before I can even look at the rest of the schedule at Texas, at Tennessee, and Georgia. And maybe people can argue maybe not at Tennessee because they're dealing with a new quarterback. But until Kentucky rejiggers this rivalry, I have a hard time picking them to win on the road.
Yeah, I feel the same way. So the DraftKings over-under for Kentucky this year is 6.5 wins. Skinny, when I look at this, I feel like 7 or 8 wins. I mean, 7 is doable. 8 wins 7's is not doable. Crazy to me.
It's not crazy, but I think 7 wins is doable. We'll just go off the top here. Southern Miss, South Carolina, Ohio, Vandy. We're at 3 there. Auburn as well. That's 4. Murray State, 5. And then the toss-up games, Louisville, just because it's a rivalry game. At Florida. Where am I looking here? Where was another toss-up game? I guess those are the 2 toss-up games, right?
Those are really the 2.
Yeah, I'm missing 1. So how many wins? I gave them Murray, Auburn's 2, Ohio's 3, South Carolina 4, Southern Miss 5. So yeah, the toss-up games, almost the automatic losses there's almost 4 automatic losses, right? Georgia, Ole Miss, at Tennessee, and at Texas. So you're only down to a couple of toss-up games to get to that number.
Yeah, that's kind of how I feel too. And I mean, I think if things really go bad, if this offense isn't as dynamic as we're hoping, maybe like I can see a worst case of 5.
Yeah, I could too. Yeah, I could certainly see that.
I mean, I think
Listen,
Southern Miss is a guaranteed. Ohio is a guaranteed. Vanderbilt is a guaranteed.
And Murray
State is a guaranteed. And then you feel like they're going to win one of the other games, probably, whether it be Louisville, whether it be South Carolina. But I mean, I can see a way in which they don't get like both South Carolina and Louisville.
Yeah, agreed. But I think they do because they're at home. But yeah, to your point, absolutely. I mean, I'm giving them the Auburn win, and that probably isn't going to be a pushover either by any stretch. It shouldn't be.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know. When we go over under 6.5,
I'd probably have to pass that number.
I think it altogether. I don't really love picking them under either.
I don't either. I'm kind of with you.
If I'm leaning under though, if I have to take anything, I'm going under.
Yeah, I mean, 6-6 feels right when you look at the schedule the way it is, but I'm gonna pass. I wouldn't make the play.
Oh, I agree with you, but if you have to choose one, would you lean under or over?
Well, if I have to choose one, I'm choosing over because I'm a damn alum.
Kentucky
so
homer,
if you think I'm picking under on that, you're crazy, man.
All right, so you went over 5 wins for Cincinnati. I went under. You're going over 6.5 wins for Kentucky. I'm going under on that. And now we're at Ohio State. Ohio State was 11-2 last year. They lost 14-3 to Missouri in the Cotton Bowl, which is obviously meaningless. Skinny, Chip Kelly is the new offensive coordinator at Ohio State. How much do you buy into the hype there? Do you think that's a big deal?
I don't. I'm sorry that I don't. I mean, it was fun when he was at Oregon, right? And then it didn't really work in the NFL. It didn't really work at UCLA. It feels like he was looking for an easy out, and he got an easy out. And I'm sorry that I don't. I just don't.
I want to buy into it, honestly. I want to believe that he's reinvigorated because he doesn't have all the duties of being a head coach and all the extra pressures and all the things that he wasn't good at. I do think this guy was innovative on offense, and I do think he can call plays. If that's all he's focused on now, I like to think he will do well at that. And I definitely think Ohio State needed to revamp the offense. I think it was a good idea to change things up and go in a different direction and try some new things, although they may have just needed a lift at the quarterback position as much as anything.
That's what I think. I think that more than anything else, that's exactly what it. I mean, last year was try to run it. Oh, Marvin Harrison bail us out, and that's literally what happened in a lot of games.
Yeah. Well, they added Kansas State quarterback Will Howard. He transferred in, and he's the expected starter. Ryan Day and Chip Kelly are acting like there's a real competition still going on there. Do you think that Will Howard will be a big improvement from Kyle McCord?
I do. I like Will Howard a lot. He can do some things with his legs. Again, this is a guy who's had success in a Power 5 league. Maybe you could even argue had a ton of success in a Power 5 league. I think Will Howard is a big time upgrade.
I do too. And I also think, I mean, you mentioned last year it was a pretty run heavy offense. I think this year it's going to be a run heavy offense again, but I just think they're going to be so dynamic in that way, especially adding Will Howard back there. I mean, they've got 2 stud running backs in that backfield. By the way, Cincinnati has a really good running back room too.
Yes, they do.
Really talk about that, but they've been the beneficiary of some of these loaded running back rooms at other schools like Ohio State.
And guess who Kentucky's best running back, although he's hurt, going to miss the opener, maybe miss the second game. He's an Ohio State guy. Yeah, he's a Ohio State guy. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's funny. It's like Kentucky landed good transfers from like Tennessee, from Georgia, from Ohio State. The problem is those guys left because they couldn't start at those schools. So you're probably still not going to beat the schools you need to beat Kentucky, but you did do well in the transfer portal.
Yes.
With Ohio State, I think Will Howard is clearly an upgrade at the quarterback position. I do think they're going to use him as a runner more. It's not going to be some of the stud passers that we've seen that put up those gaudy numbers in recent years at Ohio State before McCord, but I do think he will get back to more of that dual threat, dynamic athlete back there at that position, and that'll be fun to watch again.
Agreed. And I, like I said, I'm a big fan. I like Will Howard.
I can't wait to see this kid, Jeremiah Smith. Have you seen any of his highlights?
I've not, but I've read of it. Yes.
Yeah, this 5-star freshman receiver they have coming in. I mean, they always have unbelievable receivers. Obviously, Marvin Harrison last year. Egbuka is back this year. He should be healthy. But this kid, Jeremiah Smith, is going to be a freshman. everyone is raving about him. Even the former stars and alumni that have gone back, they've been talking about him at the spring games and
And
everything else we've seen.
that is a position I think where true freshmen can hit the ground running.
Definitely. I mean, we've seen that. And especially if you're built like this kid appears to be built, if you're physically strong enough to handle it, then you can go out and make an impact. And he definitely plans to, according to everything we've heard. All right. So let's bring up the schedule here for Ohio State. The over under is 10.5 wins for this Ohio State team. So Skinny, we're really talking about, do you see 1 or 2 losses on this schedule?
I see 3 potential hiccups, and 2 of those are on the road, at Oregon, at Penn State, and obviously until you beat them right now, Michigan in the finale. Now that is at home, and that helps. And they've kind of owned Penn State. Just can't seem to get out of its own way. It just can't seem. You talk about a program that just feels like it's on the cusp and can't take the next step. And maybe this is the year they do it, but until they do it, I'm selling short on Penn State. So that Oregon game does come after. The thing that's a little troublesome is you're going to beat Iowa, but it's going to be a physical game probably. And he'll probably beat Iowa handily. But Iowa plays so physical that then you got to go to Oregon the next week. That just seems like a big ask. That being said, I'll lean towards the over here as well.
I think so too. That's where I mean, everyone is just gushing about the amount of talent Ohio State has. Now that is every single year. They're always loaded with talent. But I think last year people knew going in, there was some concern at that quarterback position. There was a real competition battle last year between McCord and Brown. And I think McCord almost won it by default.
I agreed. I agree with that. Yeah.
And this year, I think it's different with Howard back there to go with the rest of the talent that's around him, which appears to be even better than last year from all accounts. So, yeah, I mean, I just don't, I mean, Iowa's not beating them. Penn State's not beating them. So to me, it's really about that game at Oregon and the home game against Michigan at the end of the year. And I think they're beating Michigan this year with a new coach and with that game being at home and given the recent history of that rivalry. So, I mean, to me, it comes down to that game at Oregon. I could see this Ohio State team going undefeated, quite honestly.
Oh, I could too. Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, I only see 3 potential hiccups, and I'm not telling you they're going to hiccup all of them or any of them. At Oregon, at Penn State, the Michigan game. That's it. Everything else seems very much put on a silver platter.
I think that bye week comes at a good time. The one October 19th after the Oregon game, because you play that really physical Iowa game. Then you go to play maybe the biggest game on your schedule, certainly your biggest game to that point at Oregon. Then you get the week off before a really physical Nebraska team. Nebraska's like Iowa to me. They're not going to beat you, but they're so physical and they're tough defensively. And it's just like, it's not a fun game to play. It's nice that you have that bye week off to kind of get right, recuperate before you go play a game that could be a tough one, a sneaky game at home there against Nebraska. And then you have the Penn State game on the road.
Yep. I'm more bullish on that. In fact, if there were odds for, and I'm sure there are, to take them at undefeated, because you'd probably get plus whatever, a little bit of added value to it, I wouldn't be opposed to making that play either.
Yeah. What do you think about their chances to win it all, win a championship this year? I mean, are you looking at Ohio State as that team, or are there a few others that you like better?
Yeah, I haven't looked at the value of that. I'm sure it's probably not got a lot of value to it. I would guess 5-1. If I was guessing 7-1.
Yeah, Ohio State is sitting at plus 380 according to DraftKings right now.
I just don't like that value.
Not enough.
And again, I'm not here to tell you they don't win the national championship. I just don't like the value of it. Especially in an expanded playoff format, right? Where it feels like something else could go goofy. Rick, we see it in college basketball, probably not as much in college football, but college basketball, the tournament it can get goofy, right? And it does.
It's just that adding an extra round or two in there is a big deal, even for the best team. I mean, it just takes away a little bit of that certainty you have. Like, last few years, it felt like we're going to see Georgia in the championship no matter what. Well, if it was the same way this year. I mean, Georgia doesn't have that type of team necessarily this year, but if they were in that position this year, you would have just a little bit more doubt. And from a betting perspective, that would definitely change the value of some of those picks.
Yeah, agreed. And listen, you're going to get some of these teams. You're going to you might get a 3-loss SEC team that's really, really good.
Yeah. I mean, we've seen that the last couple of years where there were teams right on the cusp. Ohio State last year, could have made the argument that they should have been in the playoffs still.
Yeah, for sure.
All right. Anything else on the college football world as a whole, or any of these local teams that I missed on that you want to bring up or mention here?
starting next week, and you mentioned it's when we get a little taste of games. There's a handful of them, and degenerates like myself and yourself will probably have something action-wise, not a lot, but it kicks it off. I believe there's a college football game each and every week from a week from this Saturday through the middle of January. How about that?
You love to hear it. You
Don't
love to
hate
hear it.
Yep.
Sure, you could stop watching now, but let's be honest, you want to see more. So click some of those links, or better yet, go ahead and tap subscribe. That way you'll catch more content from Local 12.